Welcome! It's Facts You Don't Know. If it's your first time here and you want to find out new facts that will definitely make you smarter and more, well, and first make sure to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss anything.
Every day, an old woman hid in the branches to spy on her husband. But what she discovered shocked her. Leonard and Rouse were an elderly couple from southern England who reached half a century of marriage in the midst of a quiet but happy life. Both soccer fans, they'd met as teenagers in the stands of Old Trafford, home of the famous Manchester United team. They never thought that this chance meeting would be the beginning of a long and beautiful love story. Together, there were countless soccer games and moments they had shared side by side. He's a worker in a car factory, and she's a secretary at a local university. They anxiously waited for her to arrive every weekend to travel around the country, following the team of their loves. At first, the relationship began as a crazy summer love. But as the days and weeks passed by, the love was consolidated until a close and solid bond was sealed. But their story was just beginning, and they would still have many challenges to face together. The first big challenge they had to face was Leonard's dismissal from his job due to the economic crisis. Used to living far from his parents, the boy refused to ask for their help. To live with them again would be to distance himself from that woman whom, although he'd not known for a long time, he already loved madly. However, immersed in the macho prejudices of modern society, the young man also refused to accept the help that his girlfriend offered him. The idea of his friends making fun of him for being financially dependent on a woman was unbearable. So their relationship was about to end. Rouse was totally understanding and tolerable with the situation her boyfriend was going through, and she was totally willing to help him in whatever way she could. But what she was not willing to tolerate was because of silly sexist prejudices. Her boyfriend won't accept that help. After many weekends arguing, she understood that a turning point had arrived in their young relationship, and she made it known to him. He had to choose between submission to the teasing of his friends or to the love she professed for him. Leonard, feeling manipulated by the dilemma he was facing, yelled at her and left her alone where she was. Everything seemed to indicate that it was the end of their relationship. Since they met, it was the first time that they'd spent more than a day without knowing about each other. Each one took refuge with their friends and tried to drown their sorrows between alcohol and soccer. Although going now separately to the stadium, after a month of silence, something completely unexpected happened. Paul, Leonard's best friend and supposedly the most macho, made his friend see reason. He opened his eyes, telling him that he only broke up with his girlfriend because she'd offered to help him in a difficult moment. Those words marked a before and after in his life. That night, Leonard went to Rouse's house to offer her forgiveness. Unemployed and having used up almost all his savings, he didn't know how he would face his life from now on. But what he was convinced of was that he wanted to do it next to her. Rouse, without grudges at how rude he was last time they saw each other, not only forgave him but renewed her offer of help. After a whole night talking calmly, they reached an important agreement that he would go live with her. That way he saved the rent and could start seeing each other every day and not just on weekends. To save a little money, now the two people had to live on her salary. They also agreed that they would sacrifice the passion that had united them, stop going to the stadium, and now watch the games on television. In order to not feel useless and to show that his macho prejudices were overcome, Leonard promised to take on the domestic chores of the house. A new stage was beginning in their relationship, and they were eager to discover how they would coexist together. Their new normal, just as they planned it. In that conversation, it was very happy, but also very short. Good news would come very soon to change his life for the better. Now, a few weeks after living together, the university where Rouse works opened a janitor vacancy. She, excited about the idea of being able to continue helping her boyfriend and working in the same place, told him about the job. Leonard didn't hesitate for a second to introduce himself, and after a short pre-selection period, he received the welcome news that he'd been chosen. Everything seemed to start to improve in the lives of the two. But there were also some problems to solve, that agreement they'd reached that they decided to move in together. It was that it would be a temporary situation, and that would last as long as Leonard's unemployment. But now that he got a job, he'd become so used to each other's daily company that neither of them wanted to part. Thus, although they considered it risky to wear down the relationship by going too fast, they decided to take the risk and not separate. At the time of doing so, they had no idea how steely that decision was. Shortly after being in that new stage, bad news came to assail his happiness again. After the pertinent medical examinations, the diagnosis was conclusive. Rouse had breast cancer. In the face of the strong depression in which she fell due to this fact, now it was Leonard who understood that his role was to support his partner. In the most difficult moments of the treatment, when Rouse felt weakest, Leonard gave her all his love to ensure a moment of happiness. Together they returned to the stadium, and little by little she was convinced that healing was possible. There were 10 hard years of treatment. Whenever they believed that the disease had been overcome, it would appear again. But together they always stood next to each other, without stopping going to the stadium. Every time they had the chance, they were able to overcome that tough challenge that life had faced with them. The closure of the disease was celebrated by the couple buying a small rural property on the outskirts of the city, and where they shared the rest of their life together. After so many decades living together and having overcome so many adversities hand in hand, they never imagined that, being already elderly, their tranquility would be interrupted again. When they'd already been retired for a few years, enjoying their pension, Rouse discovered that something strange was happening with her husband. Every morning he'd get up earlier than usual and wander seemingly aimlessly throughout the house. Tired of her husband's strange behavior, the old woman began to get up shortly after him and decided to hide in the garden of her abode, covering herself with branches. But as the days passed, Rouse's intrigue increased more, because what Leonard did, although it made no sense, was not suspicious either. The old man simply walked around the house, put a chair in front of the exit door, and sat in it for half an hour, staring at the horizon. The more inexplicable and repetitive Leonard's behavior was, the more desperate and intrigued Rouse became, who continued to spend the first 2 hours of each morning in her garden spying on her husband, until one morning something changed in Leonard's routine. That day the old man did everything as he had done the previous days. He toured the house, stopping at the same places each morning. He pulled his chair out to the front of the door, sat down, and looked at the horizon. But this time there was a new detail. Leonard burst into tears. Her husband's tears disarmed his wife. All her doubts and fears vanished when she saw Leonard weak. She couldn't contain her secret and went out into the branches of the garden and introduced herself to her husband, who in turn was puzzled to see that his wife had discovered him. The old man had begun to notice for a few weeks that his vision was diminishing. In one of the visits to the city, he'd taken the opportunity to get a medical checkup that had come out of that bastard. He suffered from a disease that would kill his vision to the point of making him completely blind in a matter of months. Since then, Leonard had found it was difficult to sleep. Hence, he got up every morning restless to wander around the house. What he was worried about was not going blind, but failing to see the face of the woman he loved so much and with whom he'd been in love for so many years. Then Rouse reminded her husband of all the adversities that they together had overcome at the time. His unemployment, her cancer, and as always the love and will to fight together had been stronger than any problem they'd faced. If they'd succeeded before, there was no reason not to be able to do so now. She promised to be his eyes as long as he was alive, and they merged in a long and heartfelt hug. Since that morning, every day the couple dedicated a long moment for Leonard to detail with his hands the face of his beloved, to engrave her features in his memory for when he could no longer see. And that day finally came. But as they had proposed it, and as they'd done in their youth, they were able to face adversity together, with love and patience, giving a lesson in affection and showing that when the feeling is strong, there's no disease that can take it away. Thanks for watching. Please like and share the video in social networks. We'll be right back to you as fast as we can.